The board has determined we will meet in person for our business meetings and continue meeting remotely for study sessions, work sessions, retreats, etc. We will be conducting a debrief on tonight's meeting at our retreat next week to determine our path forward for in-person meetings. I'd like to review our process for this evening. We are following the guidelines from the Centers for Disease Control, the Washington State Department of Health, the Yakima County Health District, and the Governor's Office, which include a 16-point safety compliance checklist for in-person meetings. We will continue to offer an online streaming and attendance option for those who are not comfortable with meeting in person. Tonight's meeting is being live streamed, and that can be found on the board docs page for tonight's meeting, the link for that. The username and password for the live streaming is also available on that page. Tonight's meeting is also being recorded for future rebroadcast on the YPAC cable channel and the district's YouTube channel. As always, we invite the public to attend our in-person meetings. Meeting capacity per the safety protocols cannot exceed 25% of total capacity of the room, or 200 people, whichever is less. Since the auditorium here at Eisenhower is one of the largest seating areas in our district, we have chosen to hold our business meetings here in order to allow for the largest number of people to attend and still comply with safety protocols. If capacity exceeds 25% of this room, I will call for a recess until a future time, date, and place in order to comply with the protocols. Attendees and board members will be spaced appropriately to allow for 6 feet of social distancing. This is the biggest horseshoe I've ever seen in my life. Only those attendees who reside in the same household will be allowed to sit next to each other during the board meeting. All in-person attendees will be required to wear a face mask. Only those individuals who have a mask waiver on file with the Yakima County Health District will be allowed to not comply with a face covering. A copy of the approved waiver will be required at the building entrance. All in-person attendees are required to show or complete an attestation form to enter the building. The link to this attestation form can be found on the district website and is also available at the entrances. We ask that attendees do not bring in food or drink, with the exception of personal water bottles as needed. Hand sanitizer will be provided at designated entrances and within the meeting room. At each school board meeting, at least one Yakima School District staff member will be designated as the COVID-19 program supervisor for the duration of the school board meeting. This supervisor will ensure masking and social distancing practices are enforced and practiced by all event attendees. If an attendee chooses not to comply, the supervisor will ask them to leave the meeting. As I indicated earlier, we have tonight, we will be conducting near simultaneous Spanish interpretation of our meeting. Speakers are asked to speak slowly, clearly, limit the use of acronyms, and provide occasional pauses to ensure that the translator catches all the conversation. Anyone wishing to provide public comment to the board is welcome to do so in accordance with our established protocols. We provide 2 opportunities for public comment during our business meetings. One, which is early in the meeting, specifically is for items that are on the agenda, and one at the end of the meeting for other items that may not be on the agenda. Those wishing to provide public comment, either online or in person, must have registered with the superintendent's executive assistant prior to this meeting. Information about that registration is available on tonight's meeting page in Board Docs. I also want to thank Eisenhower for the lovely table covering. We want to thank them for allowing us to use the auditorium tonight, and future meetings will have a table covering for that identifies this as Yakima School District. So the next item on the agenda is a land acknowledgement. We will have more about this later on in the meeting when we discuss the proclamation for land acknowledgement. But I'd like to take a moment to read tonight's land acknowledgement. Today, the schools of the Yakima School District rest on the ancestral lands of the 14 confederated tribes and bands of the Yakima Nation. The people of Yakima Nation inhabited more than 12 million acres across Adams, Benton, Chelan, Douglas, Franklin, Grant, Kittitas, Klickitat, and Yakima counties. Today, we honor those Native peoples who are tied to the land through history, legends, and culture. We acknowledge their descendants who live in the world today. We thank the caretakers of this land who have lived here and continue to live here since time immemorial. An acknowledgement is a simple, powerful way to show respect and a step toward connecting the stories and practices that erase Indigenous peoples' history and culture. It also honors the truth. As a school district, we will continue to build upon our relations with the Yakima Nation. This land acknowledgement will be read before every one of our meetings of the school board from now forward, and is part of our partnership with the Yakima Nation. Next on our agenda, we have acknowledgements, announcements, and recognitions. Before we get into the acknowledgements and accomplishments, I do have a couple of sad pieces of news to share with you. You may have seen in the paper 2 obituaries for former Yakima School District employees and members of our Yakima School District family. Mr. Frank Steele passed away on Sunday, February 28th from Lewy body dementia. Some knew him as Frank, some as Stubby, some as Mr. Steele, but many more knew him as Coach. Most of his childhood was spent on the family farm or working in the woods for his dad's logging company. As he was growing up, he was a 3-sport letterman and standout athlete in football, baseball, and basketball at Onalaska High School, from which he graduated in 1962. He spent some time after graduating from high school in a variety of jobs, but then landed at Central Washington University, where he played for the legendary coach Jack Elway. He played also under Tom Perry, who had an enormous influence over his coaching and educational journey. Frank graduated from Central Washington University with a bachelor's degree and a teaching certificate in physical education. He went on to teach and coach at various school districts in Hoquiam, and Highland before settling at Toppenish High School. He was at Toppenish for several years and took them to a state championship in 1989 with their football team. He was also a great powerlifting coach and coached Sophie Trevino, who became a national powerlifting champion. Frank then moved to Davis High School, where he continued with along the same path as he had at Toppenish. He coached football and built the Davis powerlifting program into the same powerhouse. The metal patch weight room inspired many Davis Pirates. Earning a metal patch t-shirt can be found throughout the valley. Just ask any graduate from Toppenish High School or Davis from the 1980s through the early 2000s. They are still worn with pride, knowing that Coach Steele made them work hard to earn it. He hung up his coaching shoes and retired from Davis High School and proceeded to pick up a fishing pole, which was never far from his grasp. He loved fishing because he could take his family, friends, and old coaching buddies out to Ilwaco on the Columbia River, when the fish were biting in Washington State. The truck, boat, and trailer were always hooked up and ready to roll to his next destination. Throughout time, Frank's number one priority was his family. He met his wife Susan in high school and later married in July of 1967. They were married for 54 years until his passing. Frank was preceded in death by his parents, Robert and Mary Steele, his sister Bobby Perkins. He is survived by his wife Susan and 4 children: James Scott, Trent and Sherry Steele, Tori and Kevin Brennan, and Timmy and Lincoln Nugent, and grandchildren Riley, Cy, Taylin, Marley, Sari, Chet, Carly, and Chase. The family would like to thank Highgate Senior Living for the last 5 years of unwavering love, patience, and care that was given to Frank. Frank left a lasting legacy and made a positive impact on the world and so many lives. He will be greatly missed by many. There was a viewing on March 4th, and there will be a private family burial. A celebration of life will be held this summer where many can gather, reminisce, tell stories, and laugh about Coach Steele. We want to extend our sympathies and condolences to Coach Steele's family, especially to Tori, who is also a member of our school district family and is the assistant principal at Barge, correct? We also, during this last month, lost Ronald Dale Donaldson. He passed away peacefully with his family at his side on March 3rd, just in time to take his tea time to the clouds. He was the son of Russell and Carol Donaldson and the big brother to Ken. During his youth, Ron was active in sports. He began bowling as a child and averaged 197 as an adult. He also enjoyed youth baseball and was proud to be a part of the 1965 state championship Yakima Legion team. He shared his love for sports by coaching 6 seasons of middle school sports Hunting and fly fishing were also on his list of favorite activities. Anyone who knew him was well aware of his enthusiasm for golf that started in 1978 and lasted until the end. During his golf career, he won 2 championships at the Elks Golf and Country Club, and his natural skill earned him 7 holes in 1. Ron was a product of the Yakima School District, graduating from Davis High School with that famous class of 1965. From there, he went to Central Washington University, where he majored in music education and composition. His highlight was having the honor of being tutored by the world-famous composer Paul Creston and graduating in 1969, the same year that he married his first wife, Cheryl Liebert. Mr. D, as his students called him, never worked a day in his life. And we've all heard that saying, haven't we? If you love the job that you have, you'll never work a day in your life. His passion for teaching nurtured an amazing career where he taught magnificent musicians, as well as those who loved performing in music groups. Everyone was welcome in his band and choirs. Mr. D has maintained contact with many of his former students, and if any of them spotted their former teacher in public, they greeted him with a warm smile and open arms. The last 16 of his 30 years of teaching and molding young musical minds were spent dedicated to the Davis Buccaneer Band as their director. Following his retirement, Ron spent as much time as he could at the Elks, golfing with his wonderful wife or winning bets with golf pigeons. Ron was preceded in death by his parents, Russell and Carol Donaldson. He is survived by his beautiful wife, Lo, of 25 years, his brother, Ken, and wife, Terry Donaldson, 5 children, Brian and Jeannie Huck, Becky and Brad Wickenhagen, Scott and Jen Huck, USAF Captain Christopher and Janae Donaldson, and Lisa Donaldson. He is also survived by 10 grandchildren and 3 great-grandchildren. At his request, there will be no formal services. Donation in his memory can be made to the Yakima Elks Golf and Country Club Rose Garden Memorial. You can also visit valleyhillsfh.com to share a memory or condolence with the family. Please join me for a moment of silence for these 2 esteemed members of our community. Thank you very much. Our deepest condolences to the Steele and Donaldson families in this time of their loss. Okay, next item on our acknowledgements is the Acknowledgement of Classified Employees Week. It was March 8th to 12th, so last week. Raymond? Okay. You want to read it?
Good evening. It's my pleasure to read this proclamation on Classified Employees, School Employees Week. The Board of Directors recognizes Classified School Employees Week and urges families and community members to join them in expressing thanks to these dedicated individuals for the work they are doing for children enrolled in Yakima Public Schools. Classified Employees Week, as President Rice mentioned, is March 8th to 12th, 2021.
We could not have gone through this last year and supported our students in the way that we did had it not been for the dedicated work of our classified employees. We did read a proclamation into the record at our last board meeting, and want to encourage everyone, pardon me, to thank the classified employees with whom they work or who they have in their lives. As I said, we couldn't have gotten through this last year without them.
Excuse me, Martha, I think one thing that should be noted is that I think, and Superintendent Green can confirm that they've reached over 1 million meals, right? Is that 2 million? Over 2 million meals by this group of dedicated individuals. So that just shows you the quality of staff of qualified, or the quality of our classified staff and employees in the Yakima School District, that even though there's a pandemic going on, they're going to feed the kids, and that's awesome to really hear. And I just wanted to make note of that this evening.
Yeah, we were notified earlier this month that as of March 3rd, more than 2 million meals had been served to students within the Yakima School District boundaries in this last year of pandemic. Many of those were grab-and-go meals, and those take just a little bit of time to put together. So we want to thank everyone who was involved in that effort as well, making sure that all of our students were fed. Next, we have a proclamation recognizing School Retirees Appreciation Week, March 15 to 21. Norm?
Good evening, everyone. There's two parts to my presentation this evening. The first part is to recognize the Yakima County School Retiree Association. And I'm going to read the names of their officers and committee chairs, many of whom are former Yakima School District teachers, and the rest are teachers from around the county. But those individuals are Kathy Schultz, Nick Schultz, Linda Trepanier, Sylvia Hall, Carolyn Wilson, Judy Markham, Sandy Gavin, Millie Stenjum, Larry Scholl, Lori Everett Garvin, Kathy Fletcher, Norma Haney, Peggy Young, Carolyn Wilson, Jan Saxton, Linda Lockwood, Paul Schaefer, Peggy Campbell, and again, Norma Haney. The second part of my presentation will be reading the proclamation that came from the state of Washington for this notable week. Whereas the Washington State School Retirees Association, hereinafter referred to as the WSSRA, recognizes all retired school employees. And whereas the WSSRA educates and assists retirees in meeting the special challenges retirement brings and works to improve their general welfare. And whereas the WSSRA aids in advancing education by supporting high educational standards, and whereas the WSSRA promotes group and individual involvement in charitable projects and activities, sponsors scholarships, and maintains interest and participation in educational and community activities. And whereas the WSSRA supports and encourages retired educators to remain active in the education profession through volunteer activities associated with learning. Now, therefore, I, Jay Inslee, Governor of the State of Washington, do hereby proclaim March 15th through 21st, 2021 as School Retirees Appreciation Week in Washington. And I encourage all people in our state to join me in this special observance. Signed this 17th day of December, 2020, Governor Jay Inslee.
Thank you, Norm. We have signed certificates for all of the officers of the Yakima Valley School Retirees Association, and we will be mailing those certificates out to them. Next item on our agenda is reports from the board. Are there any board members who wish to provide a report on any of their activities? Seeing none, I did want to let the board know that I was asked to testify last week for two bills, 1208 and 1342, in front of their respective Senate committees. All the bills have now switched houses. So if they made it out of their original their house of origin, they are now in the opposite house. So House bills are now in the Senate and Senate bills are now in the House. The numbers of bills, understandably, have decreased significantly. So we don't have quite as many to follow, but the ones that are still active are quite important to us. This is the week on the Hill for the State School Directors Association, the State Administrators Association, and the State Association of School Business Officers. So those three associations band together, and typically we have a day on the Hill, but because everything is virtual this year, it takes longer, so we now have the week on the Hill. And we have meetings set up with all the legislators, well, nearly all of the legislators from our area. I met yesterday with Senator Honeyford, along with some folks from Wapato. Today I joined folks from Ellensburg and Moses Lake in meeting with the representatives and senator from the 13th district. And tomorrow have a meeting with the 14th district, and then on Thursday have a meeting with Representative Chandler. So getting my Zoom time in this week. Next item on our agenda is the superintendent update. Mr. Superintendent.
Thank you, President Rice. Last week, the governor announced that he is issuing an emergency proclamation that prohibits all school districts from failing to offer all K-12 students the opportunity to engage in both remote and online instruction and on-campus in-person instruction. I'll share with the board three key points of that proclamation this evening. Number one, the emergency proclamation is based on a children's mental health emergency. While Washington has had high rates of youth mental and behavioral health problems in the past, there is evidence that lack of connection to peers, mentors, and educators during the pandemic have led to feelings of disconnection and isolation and unprecedented increases in mental and behavioral health issues. Hospitals and pediatricians have provided data that show these problems have significantly worsened in this school year. In fact, the governor had Dr. Asante as one of the individuals presenting during his press conference. Number two, the emergency proclamation requires districts to offer an in-person option as well as a remote option in all grades by April 19th, which we currently do. And then the last item of interest for the board is something more related to the work that in which the board has engaged over the last several months. And it reads as follows: the governor acknowledged the long-term inequities and racial biases in the educational system and expressed a need to create policies supported by investments to address these issues. So it was also very nice to hear the governor recognize and call attention to the racial and educational inequities that exist currently, and to know that Dr. Pimpleton, who is with us this evening, has continued to take us on a journey to better understand those racial and educational inequities in our current system. Item 2 for this evening that I'd like to share is that as we talk about full hybrid, we entered our first cohort, cohort A, Monday. So we now have every grade level in session. We will have cohort B that will enter on Thursday and Friday. I was able to get to 5 buildings the first day. It was wonderful to talk with our educators. There's an excitement of having the students there. I had some, I can think of some teachers at a couple of our elementary schools that were teary on the way to school with the excitement of seeing their class. I was at McKinley Elementary as the students were lined up to go into class and saw the exchange of a couple of teachers and their students, and to feel the palpable excitement was just a wonderful thing to experience. In addition, I was able to get to the high schools, the 2 major high schools in Davis and Eisenhower this time, and spent significant time speaking with the teachers and going in classrooms and out of classrooms and addressing concerns as they were brought to my attention. And there was excitement at the high school level as well. It may not have been as palpable, but it was there at the high school level also. Dr. Darling, I know you were also able to get around to several buildings. I would like him to share his impressions before I continue. Dr. Darling.
Good evening, board. Yes, so first off, I started on Monday out at McClure with Mrs. Casillas and Mrs. Lee, and they know my prowess in education and my degrees, so they had me sit in the gym and point kids in the right direction, which was a step up from the last time I was there. They had me handing out lanyards, so they put me to good use. But the teachers were saying exactly what Superintendent Green was saying, that there's a lot of nervousness and trepidation about being back in person, but once they saw kids in front of them, they remembered, oh, this is why we're here, this is why we do this, and they just kind of got back in the routine. It was a really interesting first day of school because they've been virtual with these students for 3/4 of the school year. In elementary school, they've seen their faces. In the high school, they probably saw a purple dot with their letters in front of the dot, but they said they still have routines and such built up with them in these relationships. Now it's actually get to do it in 3D. They said they're really excited about that. I visited McClure, and then from there I went to Nob Hill and poked my head in a few classrooms, and then I went to visit McKinley, and teachers and students were busily engaged, and all I was doing was getting in the way. And so it's exciting, and especially elementary school, you can feel that excitement, and teachers say that they've never had students on better behavior, so we might continue with the mask requirements for several years, and that it keeps them quiet and sitting straight up in their chairs.
Thank you, Dr. Darling. That did bring to my mind one educator who shared that the kids were talking and she gave them some time at the beginning of class to just get to know each other and have conversation. And she noted that it was not as loud as it usually is because, of course, half the students are there. But in visiting the classrooms, although I did not take a formal poll, I would say that we had around 80% or higher of attendance with our students that were there in cohort A. So we had very high attendance overall in the classrooms that I visited. Do we have any questions about the hybrid entry?
Any questions from the board? I think the board might be interested to know about attendance after we get maybe a week or 2 into this.
Certainly.
And maybe have a discussion about how we follow up with those students that have fallen away.
Well, thank you. I will talk about attendance here in a few moments. So
Okay.
Absolutely, and we
There
will
you
get that
go.
to you. So thank you.
I don't mind setting you up
You
for.
did. You just a little bit early, but pretty good. We'll reference that. I also would like to acknowledge here for the board this evening that we have a few teachers who have successfully achieved the national board certification this year. It's a small number, this initial number, which is why I'm sharing at the board in this setting, but also certainly want to acknowledge their success in this venue. We had Brent Daly from Lewis and Clark. Catherine Graham from Ridgeview, Jason Wells from Eisenhower, and Michael Giulioni from Davis. So those 4 teachers, I have sent congratulations to them and communicated with them, but we look forward to presenting them to the board in the future. Yes. I'm excited about this setting, about being in person, because there have been some changes in leadership since obviously we were last in session a year ago. And in some cases, you're aware of the changes. I believe you do know of all of them. But I did go back a little bit to bring some people here today so that we could present them to the board. So I have five individuals that I've asked, or 4 that are present here this evening, and 1 that I will present that was unable to be here. So after the presentation, I have requested that they certainly exit and not stay around for the entire meeting, especially we have 1 that traveled pretty far to get here. So it's my pleasure to introduce some of our new leaders here in the district. And I will ask them to approach the microphone as I read your name and read about you. And then if you have any questions for any of these individuals, I would certainly ask you to engage with them. So first we have Jenny Rodriguez. She is our new Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning. A short biography. We have an extended biography coming forward. We're excited about her in her new role, pending board approval. She is most proud of her family. She and her husband celebrated their 22nd wedding anniversary. I believe it was within the last week. And they are the proud parents of 2 teenage daughters. Dr. Rodriguez currently serves as the Executive Director of Teaching and Learning at Pasco School District, where her duties include leadership of all secondary schools, support for career technical education and online learning programs, and coordination across a variety of departments to ensure quality teaching and learning for all students. Dr. Rodriguez began in education as an elementary school secretary and has worked in a variety of roles across multiple levels of public education. Prior to her current position, she served as the principal of the Delta High School in the Tri-Cities, an award-winning tri-district STEM-focused program serving students from Kennewick, Pasco, and Richland school districts. Welcome, Dr. Rodriguez, and if you would like to certainly introduce your husband to us, that would be wonderful as well.
Sure.
Members of the board?
Thank you so much, Superintendent Green, President Rice, honored members of the board. It's my pleasure to be with you tonight. Actually, quite a treat to be in person with folks at a board meeting. So thank you for the opportunity. I'm very excited to be joining the Yakima School District. I'm very impressed with the leadership of the board and cooperation with Superintendent Green, Deputy Superintendent Darling, and the staff of Yakima School District and the community around development of your district's strategic improvement plan. So I'm very excited to join you this summer and roll up my sleeves alongside you and work towards meeting all of the goals of your district plan. I am happy to have my husband Tony with me this evening, so I'm sure you'll see him at future events. My daughter's one is heading off to college in the fall and the other will be a senior, so you might not see them as frequently, but you'll probably see this guy a few times. So thank you again for having me. I'm very excited to be joining the team.
Thank you. Any questions
Any questions from the board?
or comments?
Thank you, Dr. Rodriguez, and I hope that you share with our colleagues on the Pasco School Board that we really do love them and hope that they'll still talk to us.
They can be a rough crowd, but I will let them know.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Jenny. We certainly do invite you, when you feel so inclined, to go ahead and head back to Pasco if you'd like, but you're welcome to stay as long as you would like. And I would like to, in addition, commend the board for not taking any cheap shots at Dr. Darling for his being replaced as a Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning. We know that he has done a wonderful job, and we're excited about him moving full-time into the role of Deputy Superintendent. Our next individual is Shelby Lockhart. She is our new Executive Director of Student Achievement. We're proud to welcome her in her new role. She will now serve the YSD as Executive Director, along with overseeing everything data and assessment related. Shelby will lead the district's MTSS work and attendance initiatives. Mrs. Lockhart started at the YSD 5 years ago as the math and science director. Prior to her career in education, she played for Western Washington women's varsity soccer team, worked with Seattle Youth Garden Works at University of Washington, and led sea kayaking trips in Alaska. She loves spending time with her family, watching soccer, and traveling. She is thrilled to continue to be a part of the YSD family. Thank you, Shelby. Welcome. Welcome to your new role.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you very much for the new role. Somebody told me the other day Yakima's lucky to have me, and I said, I think it's the other way around. I'm lucky that Yakima, that I have Yakima. So being kind of a local Yakimaniac, I've just really appreciated my work here, and I'm really excited about the work that I'm already doing in the data world, in the assessment world, and the MTSS world. So thank you.
We will hear from Shelby a little bit later, but I would invite Dr. Darling, who really advocated for this position and expanded the role, of which I've just been amazed. You have done some phenomenal things in this transition to this role. If you have any words.
This is one of the silver linings of COVID because Shelby was supposed to be in Costa Rica right now. She had resigned as director to go down to Costa Rica and take that experience. COVID shut down and she was in no man's land. We'd already replaced her. And so we're like, hey, well, let's take advantage of this and have her fill a role temporarily. And then as we were able to maneuver it, we were able to elevate that role and fill some big gaps that we needed in some leadership positions, and especially around data and how do we use data to really determine what's working, what's not working, and how can we move forward at an accelerated rate. And so if you ever want to have a conversation that makes you feel insignificant, talk to Shelby, because she's a really, really smart when it comes to that kind of stuff. And I just smile and nod and act like everything's my idea, but it's not, it's hers.
Thank you.
Well, not me.
Okay.
Any questions or comments from the board?
Sure. I just want to say, Shelby, you're going to be my favorite person. Especially, I think, just the favorite person of the board, because the direction we're going in terms of data and inequities that we're currently examining and planning to deal with here in the near future. I know you'll play a key part. So welcome to your new role in the Yakima School District. And it's the other way around. The school district is very fortunate to have such a person as you serving kids. Thank you.
Any other comments? Congratulations on your new position, Shelby. We are very lucky indeed to have you back.
Thank you. And well said, Director Navarro. Certainly having that data information is something that we have missed, and we're excited about her new role. Our next individual is Sarah Cordova, and she has been our Director of Safety and Security, but she is also now our District Athletic Director. She will serve at part-time in those positions, making one whole position. She and her husband, Jonathan, live in Yakima and are the parents of one daughter and 3 sons. She and her family love to travel anywhere warm. While Sarah is in her 24th year of working in education, with 19 of those with the Yakima School District, her first love has always been athletics. While working at Washington Middle School, in addition to her other roles as an administrator, Sarah worked as an assistant principal and served as athletic director there at the school for 5 years, collaborating with other athletic directors, coaches, student athletes, and the community. We are excited to welcome her into her new role.
Hi, thank you for having me here this evening. I really am enjoying my new roles, both as Safety and Security Director and as the Athletic Director.
Wonderful. And I think I would call to the attention that when we have the mental health issues and emergencies and depression issues that we're notified of as a district, Sarah is the person that gets the first call and daylights that for Stacy and myself and others. So she is on the clock 24 hours a day pretty much, because certainly those calls typically come in the middle of the night. But we're so grateful for you for that service and serving our students, but also for this expanded role. as District Athletic Director, especially as we look at moving into the Mid-Valley next year, which was scheduled for this year, but delayed because of the pandemic, so that we know that our athletes will benefit from that expanded opportunity, and we're grateful to have you in that role.
Any questions or comments from board members? Sarah, welcome to your new position. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next position is one that's near and dear to my heart. It's the executive assistant to the superintendent, but also serves the board. We are losing Jennifer Baird. I'm still coming to terms with that reality. And we're grateful for all of her work over many years. And I couldn't think of a better individual to work with over my first 2 years. So I'm grateful for Jennifer Baird. In filling the position that Jennifer is vacating, we were fortunate to find Barb Anderson, and thank you, Director Rice, for participating in the interview process representing the board. So we're excited to welcome Barb as the new administrative assistant to the superintendent beginning April 12th. Barb loves spending time with her large family, hiking, and working on photography projects. She is currently the Director of Materials Management and Logistics Support for Pacific Northwest University of Health Sciences. Prior to her work at PNWU, Ms. Anderson was an administrative assistant at Gonzaga University School of Law. Hands off, Bob. We know you got that law. You're looking for a law clerk, but nope. So she has extensive experience at the University School of Law, worked as an executive assistant to the superintendent's office in Douglas County, Colorado, and began her career in education over 20 years ago as a classroom teacher. So we're excited that she has that experience of having been in the classroom as an educator, but also then serving educators in a similar role. Welcome, Barb.
Very much for that introduction. I'm excited to be here and excited to be back in public education.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments from board members? Congratulations, Barb. It's nice to see you again.
Thank you. I have big shoes to fill, and I'm excited to be with Jennifer for the next couple of months.
I was always told that you don't fill the shoes, but you use those shoes as guideposts.
I like that. Thank you. I'll adopt that.
Welcome.
Thank you. And our the last individual we'd like to present, unfortunately, is not here this evening. He is in his current role as a principal in Wyoming. This individual is Chris Jensen. He is the new principal at Ridgeview Elementary. We announced that to their staff this afternoon. Dr. Darling and I did. So we welcome Christopher Jensen as the new principal, and he and his wife Holly have 7 children, 5 girls and 2 boys, and recently became grandparents with the birth of his first grandson. He is an avid fly fisherman and spends as much time hiking in the mountains as possible during the summer. As a building administrator, Mr. Jensen's main focus is building relationships with students, staff, and the community. He values leading teachers in high-functioning collaborative teams in a professional learning community, as well as creating leadership roles for students. He has 10 years of experience as a school administrator, and he is also a bilingual, biliterate Spanish speaker. So we're excited. He's not a native speaker, but he is fluent in Spanish, and that's going to be of great benefit at the RV, Ridgeview Elementary. So we welcome, even though he's not here, Principal Jensen.
Please extend our congratulations to him, and we look forward to actually meeting him in person.
Absolutely, will do. I think we're very excited about the match of Spanish-speaking administrators that we have and English-speaking administrators that we have, and we noticed that is really increasing at the elementary level. That is with intent. So I think we have bilingual duos at every elementary on the east side of town, with the exception currently of, I believe, Garfield at the moment. Is that correct, Dr. Darling? Yep. Okay. A few more items to share in this report. We have a wonderful summer school preschool opportunity that Dr. Darling and I were able to organize over the last year. It has been mainly under the stewardship of Dr. Darling, and I asked him to share about our partnership with Waterford. Dr. Darling?
Thank you, Superintendent. So as you'll remember last year, Dr. McGeaney was able to provide a preschool program that's fully remote for our migrant students, where they received a laptop, they received the access to the program, and they received training in English and in Spanish for them and their parents on this upstart through Waterford. Well, we recently learned, Dr. McGeaney and I learned from Waterford, that we are now going to be able to offer this program for all of our incoming kindergartners this summer. And we know that part of the reason why the students are successful, and Dr. McGeaney shared this with me, that he had about 75% of his students meet or exceed the minimal number of minutes that Waterford recommends that students do to be successful. And those students significantly outperformed everybody else as they entered kindergarten compared to the rest of their cohort. And that group these were migrant students, and many of them Spanish speaking, and Spanish is their first language. So we're excited about this opportunity to be able to help mitigate some of that loss coming into our kindergarten program this year, with the incentive that if students complete the program and complete the required minutes, they're able to keep the laptop for their family use. And so this is another way to help incentivize this effort, but also to continue students moving forward and being better prepared to enter kindergarten next year. So we're very excited about this and look forward to seeing this impact it's going to have for many years.
It's very exciting, and I have to thank again you as our school board by setting the direction and approving our strategic plan. We can see that the focus that we're now engaged in is specific and intentional, and knowing that prior to the work in which Dr. Darling has facilitated, we only had 20% of our students coming into our program, into our school, ready according to our WA Kids data. So knowing that we have to move that needle to 95% by 2026, we're very encouraged by what we've seen so far, even during this pandemic, where we've been able to focus on opportunities that weren't there previously. So thank you, Dr. Darling. Along the lines of our strategic plan, we also have started a community attendance think tank. So you may think back to our strategic plan. Goal number 2 was around attendance, and credit goes to our new executive director, Shelby Lockhart, who is facilitating our community attendance think tank. And they're meeting about every 3 weeks to identify barriers to attendance. And Shelby, would you please share a little bit of information about that think tank process?
I'm happy to share. So we have just started meeting. One of my first moves with being kind of overseeing attendance to really make sure we have clean data, to have all of our efforts aligned to the strategic plan. I don't know if you can or not, but I can just speak up. Can you guys hear me from here if I just talk?
The problem is, Shelby, that we need it for the recording, so.
Right here? Anyway, one of the other big moves is to get a committee together to really advise the work as well. So that really needs to include staff and community members and students. And so that's the work I'm leading right now, is just to get all the voices at the table. So this Friday we meet again. We've got a really great group of community leaders in the room. At their first meeting, they agreed they've got to have students in there and bring more student voice in. So at this next meeting, we're bringing in more student voices and just some data from interviewing students, what barriers they were facing to attendance. So, so it's really great work. And at the end of the day, we do want to have a messaging campaign community-wide by next year. So we would launch that this fall. So they're well aware of that and are advising that. And I just want to note that I really respect that our community members, when this was brought to the table, said, we're not really interested in choosing something like that until we hear from students. So they really wanted to hear what was going on in our students' worlds before they made decisions like that or made decisions like that with students. So it was really great moment for them. And I'm excited about the work. I think we're going to walk away with some really great things.
Thank you, Shelby.
Any questions from the board for Shelby? Shelby, did you say how many people are on this think tank?
In our first meeting, I'm going to ballpark. I think we had maybe 10 to 15 people in the room. And I kind of recruited from our community partners and our faith-based partners, and then some of our leaders in our buildings on the attendance teams that we've developed. So every building has an attendance team, and they are becoming more and more data-driven now. So I've been coaching up attendance teams to use data to respond to students that are struggling attending school.
This is excellent. The programs that I know about across the state, the districts that I know about that have attendance programs such as this, they have really ramped up their attendance simply because of the community messaging. So I'm really looking forward to hearing a little bit more about that and to see those messages out in the community.
I'll keep you guys posted.
Thank you, Shelby.
Thank you. Thank you. And speaking of student voice, we did have a session with the Superintendent Student Advisory Council earlier this evening. Thank you, Director Rice, for being a part of that meeting, for showing up and meeting our Superintendent Student Advisory Group. This was a new group. As you may remember, members of the board, there was a conversation last year about whether to have students as part of our board process. And ultimately, we ended up landing on expanding student voice across our system. Led by Dr. Pimpleton, we were able to recruit around 40 individuals from all of our secondary schools, middle schools, and high schools. And we had a smaller representation there this evening, but the work continues to be very intense, and we're getting a lot of great information from our students as they work in a model of co-design to determine and share with us what the issues are. So it's important for us to continue to go into these meetings without a preconceived notion of what the problem is, because if we listen to our students, they will tell us what systems need to be fixed, and we're excited about that ongoing work. Again, thank you for being there this evening. Along those lines, the Superintendent's Student Advisory Council was identified by the Yakima School Foundation as a recipient of one of their award this year, and so we're excited to share more of that information in the coming month when that actually does happen. So I wanted to daylight that for the board as well. And that concludes my superintendent report for this evening.
Any questions or comments from the board on the superintendent's report?
I just want to thank Superintendent Green for having that student voice, because it's very important that we hear from the students and hear what they're seeing and what they're saying, because they live it every day. And to take that information and to use it to better and strengthen the student body as well as the Yakima School District. Thank you for doing that.
Raymond?
Yes, and we don't have to discuss it now, but I would be interested at a later date in learning more, because Superintendent Green, you mentioned that one of the reasons for returning to in-person instruction was the increase in behavioral health issues right across the state. So I would just be interested perhaps at a later date on having a discussion on what we're doing to address that increase in. So that's something I'd like to discuss in the future. So
Absolutely. And I think in just sharing what I shared about our students, and as I look out and see Dr. Pimpleton, the first item that was identified by our student group was actually the mental health supports that they are longing for. And we were excited to see that, and some significant work has taken place with that group In addition, I would be happy to have a presentation for you at a later date, but we have several grant opportunities from the JED Foundation to the AWARE grant, bringing millions of dollars to our district that were secured last year that are now beginning to be implemented. As I look down and see Stacy Locke, who has been working with the Student Services Department, Omar and Amanda, to make sure that we're aligning those resources in a very coherent manner. So I'm excited about the work that we're doing around CEL, about our social emotional learning and our social emotional health, and combating the effects of the pandemic mentally and emotionally. And that's something that I really would like to present to the board. So I'm excited that you're interested in hearing more about that.
Yeah, as you know, that part of that is it's not only it's our students that we're seeing the increases across the board, right? We're seeing increases in suicidal ideation, suicide attempts, substance use, overdoses, increases in domestic violence situations and so forth and so on. So it is a big issue, and I'm glad that the Yakima School District is really going to develop a plan, or currently working to address those issues so that our students can come back and be successful in the classroom. So thank you very much, Superintendent Green.
I too am thankful that that we will be looking forward to that presentation. As you may know, one of the hot topics that the associations are discussing with the legislators this year is student well-being. And what we are seeing here in this community is not limited to our community. It's all across the state, it's all across the nation. I do know that OSPI's budget request to the legislature is for increased staffing and funding for student well-being. So we are encouraging legislators to support that budget request from OSPI, as well as support the recommendations from the staffing work group. It's not the right term for them, but that work group made recommendations a couple of years ago to increase the numbers of counselors and social workers and school psychologists within buildings and within districts. So we're encouraging legislators to look at those recommendations and see what we can do to increase those numbers as well. Staffing Enrichment Work Group, that was the name of it. So I'm looking forward to that presentation. I think that it will be quite informative to the board.
Martha, I just want to say I am elated to hear the superintendent's report as well, because I see, just leadership that we have, that we're looking at some of those tough issues, right? Attendance and, the early childhood education, giving them a good start, and looking at the 20% that are coming in that the only 20%, right? And I really like the vision that's been casted with superintendent, the team, and that's telling us we're going to hit 95 by 2026, right? And I'm kind of sensing that we're going to do it or we're going to die trying, right? And that's kind of like the sense I'm getting. So I really appreciate your leadership, the team you're putting together, and welcome Dr. Rodriguez and your husband as well. So I wanted to mention that. I didn't mention that earlier. So welcome to Yakima and to the team as well. So I just wanted to make mention of the great team we have with the superintendent and superintendent team and all the executive directors and so forth that we heard from today, and all our principals. It's a tough time right now during the pandemic, and I know that our leadership at all levels are doing an awesome job in getting kids back to school and trying to get a sense of whatever you call normacy, right? It's the new normacy is probably going to be different, and it is. So I just wanted to mention that it's exciting to hear about the things that we're doing, and we're not afraid to tackle the tough issues. So thank you, Superintendent Green. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Raymond. Anything else for this part of your report? Okay. Next item on the agenda is the superintendent's COVID-19 update.
This will be much more condensed, and I'm proud to pass the baton to live with us tonight is Jewel Brumley as she approaches the microphone. So we're so excited to see her and have her report. And I would direct you to your board docs to pull up.
It's not in there.
Oh, it's not in there?
If we could just have that presentation forwarded to us, that would be great.
All right.
Don't wait on us,
So
Joel.
Jewel, we do not have that in our board docs, so we're not going to be able to see that. So could you describe it as you share that?
Certainly.
Thank you.
Right, so our daily cases in the last week have had a couple of peaks. We had some back cases that were put in on the 9th of March. And then as soon as we moved to into phase 2, we hit 83 cases that day. But since then, we've gone down to 22 to 29 for most of the days. So you can't see it, but I do have a large red bar there for the back cases on March 9th. And then the last 2 days were in the 20s. Today we hit 54. Our 14-day rate per 100,000 has gone down again. We're at 246 per 100,000 for the 14-day rate as of March 14th. Our 7-day rate is really dropped, which is great. Our March 14th 7-day rate is 105.9. We've almost hit below 100. I still have the regional data here. Kittitas is at 191, Benton 158, Franklin 267, and Walla Walla 88. And of course, Columbia County is only at 20. Our zip code rates have gone up in some zip codes, but have also dropped in others. So 98902 is about equal to what it was last time, but it's gone up a little. 98901 has climbed the last 2 weeks in their rate per 100,000. 98908 has climbed a little, and 98903 has our hospitalizations have gone down to as low as 6 or 7 or 6, and we're at 9 the last couple of days, but today's rate is at 6. We have 6 in the hospital. Our positivity rate has kind of leveled off. We've stayed at 13.4, 13.0, but right now we're at 12.2. So we're kind of flatlined there, but still going down a little. Positivity across the region has gone down. We're the high with the 12.2. Franklin County is at 10.6, and everyone else is under. School age cases remain about 15% of our total cases in Yakima County. Cases 32%, and this is countywide, not Yakima School District. And 9th grade, 9 through 12, 39 cases for 41% of that. The forecast I added in, this is the same forecast. I haven't changed or updated the forecast based on data, but I did add in the actual counts since the middle of February. And actually, I'm really kind of proud at pretty close to my predictions. It's spiked a little bit higher than I thought when I had it kind of going neutral. But the trend is still going down, so that's good. Any questions?
Any questions from the board? Thank you, Trevor, for
Did you get
sending
that?
that file.
Okay, yeah, if you have any other questions, I sent the file. Sorry, I don't know how that happened, but Jewel, I know how hard it is to predict that trend line, so it really speaks highly to your work that it is coming in so close. Really validates your thought process and your assessment and your work for us on behalf of our district to be able to predict where we're going to be where we're going to end up and have it be so accurate. Mm-hmm.
Any questions or comments from the board? I would echo those thanks, Jules. It's really helpful to have this kind of information, and it's really encouraging to see the numbers getting lower and lower and lower.
Thank you, Jewel. And we'll continue with the latter half of the COVID superintendent update with Stacy. Stacy Lott, please.
Thank you, Superintendent Green. You probably don't have this either, correct? Board does not have this
Is this one?
PowerPoint? No. Okay, sorry. So I'll go ahead and read through it here as we look at weekly COVID contact tracing and investigations for 2021. We had an uptick this week. In fact, we had a 110% increase in investigations this week over last week. We had 36 investigations March 1st through the 7th, and we had 78 March 8th through the 14th. And we've had I didn't calculate the bottom, but 68% of the total investigations this last week were students. So we're seeing students return to campus whose parents have COVID. And so they're bringing them to, and so we're tracing back to, in most cases, it's parents who have the COVID, and the kids are then bringing it to school. Next slide, please. So our weekly COVID positive test, they went up. We had 6 students March 1st through 7th, no staff. This last week, March 8th through 14th, we had 6 students and 3 staff members for a total of 9. So we're up about 33% with positive cases. Again, at this point, no internal transmission has taken place. It's been from outside the district. And so then I just present that graph on positive cases so that you can see by color, the majority, again, were students. So asymptomatic testing for this week. We're seeing our testing numbers go down or actually basically stay about the same, but we're seeing a significant rise in vaccinations. So people getting tests, vaccinations, they're starting to kind of equal out. We had 39 tests taken last week, and all of those were negative. Go ahead and skip that one, will you, Jennifer? So when we look at vaccines, Tier 1 gave the opportunity for pre-K-12 educators and school staff to receive vaccinations. And we are looking at, we're partnering again with farm workers. We're continuing to provide names of people interested in the school district to receive vaccines, as well as working with Memorial Hospital in Astria. And the Superintendent Reichdell just sent out today other opportunities that are gearing up, which give 4 or 5 different ways for individuals, employees, and families to receive the vaccination. Tier 2 will begin on March 22nd, which is this coming Monday. That's our high-risk workers in agriculture, food processing, grocery stores, corrections, prison, jails, etc., as well as individuals who are pregnant and individuals with a disability that puts them at a high risk. So they're beginning to broaden out the scope of vaccinations, and there appears to be plenty available. Any questions that I can answer connected to this information?
Any questions or comments from the board? Thank you, Stacy. Another great report.
Thank you, Martha.
Does that conclude your COVID-19 update?
Yes, thank you.
It does. Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the Washington Middle School mascot. Mr. Superintendent, do you want to lead into this?
Absolutely. Thank you. I'm happy to have our Washington Middle School administrative team with us this evening. They're here in force, and we have our newest member of their team in Gonzalo Guion, who is here to share with us the work in which he started as a teacher some years ago, and where that has ended up as far as a potential mascot change. And so he will go through the steps of what has happened so far. I believe this began under Elaine Barotha, or maybe under Jack Irian. And we're now seeing the fruits of the efforts that he put forward. And now he's in a new role. And we're excited to have this presentation to the board, not asking for any decision this evening, simply to inform you of the process thus far. So with that, Gonzalo?
Hi, good evening, everybody. I'm Gonzalo Guillen, Mr. Hilton, and Mr. Mifflin, administrators at Washington Middle School. I'm fortunate to be in this position because Miss Day got her director position, so that opened up an opening for me, and I'm glad to be there. I've been at Washington for about 16 years. I also would be remiss if I did not.
Gonzalo, could you kind of center yourself on that mic, please? Because
Closer? I'm like right there. How's that?
as you move your head away, we lose your voice.
Okay, how's that?
Thank you.
Am I in the sweet spot now? So we'll work from here. I would be remiss if I did not mention that our first day of hybrid yesterday and today went off excellently. Our staff at Washington stepped up to the plate and they knocked it out of the park. So the sixth grade teachers the last 2 weeks set the bar up pretty high, and our teachers were able to just go right into the transition, and it went excellent today. So I invite any of you that want to go on Thursday and Friday to come see how it's done correctly. We'll be there. So Washington Middle School mascot change. So this has been a long process. This started when I was teaching AVID at Washington Middle School. The clicker is not working for me here. Yeah, it's not going to work. Okay, yeah. We'll take
And could you let us know which slide you're on to?
Yes. Right now is just the first slide. Okay, so when I started AVID years ago, working with AVID, we started doing some what's called Socratic seminars and philosophical chairs. And so we would bring in controversial subjects, and usually around the beginning of school year, around Columbus Day, we would have the discussion as to whether it's appropriate to have Columbus Day. And these discussions, they later evolved into talking about colonialism and things of that nature. So many of the students tried to start petitions, figure out ways that we could change our name in order to be something a little bit more positive. And so the efforts would start, then they would stop, usually would end with the 8th graders moving on to high school. So we looked at the different approaches that we could take, and we looked at the procedures 4226. But if you notice over the years, when I started at Washington Middle School, on the second slide, it shows all of our mascots and how they progressed. So since I've been there, we used to have the old colonial with the little George Washington at the top. The second one was a colonial that was brought in around when Lorenzo Alvarado was there. The diamond down in the bottom corner of this slide, that was actually designed by Miss Brumley and another student when she was at Washington Middle School. And then the 2012 to present, that's the one that we used, that we borrowed from George Washington University. It's George Washington. And we've been using that ever since. And also we use the Washington Middle School W. So if you've noticed, the actual colonial has been slowly disappearing. We're down to now a letter and just identifying ourselves as Washington. So after looking up operational procedure 4226, the thing that stuck out to our in our classes, ASB groups and other classes that we presented this, is it says that any of the names, activities, events, or any other identifier should be free of derogatory connotations or effects associated with race, creed, color, and national origin. So this does not follow with the colonial mascot. The students would talk about it. We would go into great detail, but in the operational procedure, it does say that it should be free of those items. And so our students agreed that that was, that fit that criteria. Some of the information that's out on the news, these are just from the last few weeks, but this has gone on throughout the nation for several years now. talking about colonialism. Even the Ornithological Society is trying to rename some birds that are named after certain people with colonialist past. We just saw the NFL has the Redskins remove their name for a while, and in fact, they didn't even come up with a name yet. They just continued as Washington, which is kind of like what we've been doing. We've just been identifying as Washington. And in the state legislature, they're advancing bills in order to remove Native American imagery and mascots from public schools as well. So even though this is all recent in the news, our efforts have been years in the making. And so in 2019 is when we really started to put everything together, following the procedure 4226 and then the 4226X, which is the form that is filled out for suggestions, and then the criteria needs to be followed as well. The part about derogatory names is also on 4226X. So if any names are presented, they have to have a rationale behind it and make sure that it fits that criteria. These are pretty hard to read, but they're actually PDFs of my forms that I collected. So we handed these out to community members, staff members, students. So the very first one there on the left, that's actually from the county workers in Yakima. They came up with those 2 suggestions for a mascot. That was one of the parents of our students at Washington. The one in the middle, that's from my ELL group. We had a group meeting and we wanted to involve the ELL students. So those are the suggestions they came up with. And then the last one, that's actually from 7th grade teachers. They had a meeting and they wanted to be part of it. I handed out these applications to anybody who would ask for them, anybody that had a suggestion. So when we formed the committee, we had to narrow it down to 10 in the committee. So the committee consisted of community members, staff, students, parents, and Mr. Hilton was there as well. And so that was when I was teaching. So we put the committee together and basically winnowed it down to 10 names, 10 suggestions, and then from there we voted to the top 5. So the committee choices of the top 5 are, there was actually 10, and then these are the top 5 that we decided from those 10. And then we put these forth with a Google form for voting. So even though I started this in 2019, COVID happened, and we had to shut everything down. So our plan was to have voting in person around conference time of 2020. And then when COVID hit, we didn't have conferences. We went to remote learning. So I did not want to let this go by. And I was fortunate enough to get my new job. So I wanted to keep it going. I did not have any lobbying behind it. I let the students run everything and then put everything together. So we came up with a Google form, presented these to the students, and allowed them to vote. We had almost 600 votes. It was open for 2 weeks. They could access the Google form at any time. But we did push it through their advisory group. So they had 2 weeks of advisory to work on it if they wanted to choose to do it during class, but they had it open at all times. And I sent out several email reminders to the students to remind them to vote. So we got almost 600 votes, and this is the order that came in. The number 1 choice was the Wolverines, 33% of the vote. 26.9% of the vote was the Lions, and 16.5% of the vote was for the Hornets. So I know Mrs. Brumley's probably looking at that Hornet, thinking that's a really good choice. The bottom 2, I just put in there just for reference. We did let the kids choose between the Eagle and a Revolutionary as an alternate to Colonial. But the top 3 were the Wolverine, the Lion, and the Hornet. And the reason I pick out the top 3 is in the procedure 4226. The top 3 names are brought forward to the superintendent and the board, and the decision is up to you. The number 1 is the Wolverine, but you also in the procedure mentions that the top two preferences after that are also presented for the final decision. And you probably saw that that presentation was a little boring, all black and white, because this is my chance now to throw in the fact that we are also missing a color at Washington Middle School. So not only am I asking for some guidance on choosing our new mascot if that's approved, but we would also love to have some sort of color brought back into our lives for our students. We know that Kirsten running the media. She takes care of all the different color palettes. So we would love to work with her and come up with something that would help our students, especially in this time of COVID. Having them come back the fourth quarter with maybe some new mascots, some new color. But also the reason I bring this up, we've been bringing this up, is Mr. Mifflin was able to secure $10,000 in funding for murals to be put in our school. And so some of these are actually the artists that the artist brought back to us as suggestions for putting in the school. And that's why we would kind of like to have a mascot or at least a color palette put in there, so it'll help guide the artist that's going to do the murals in our school. The one in the middle of the gym, that one is specific to mascot only in the middle of the gym. That was from the Oddfellows. So that's why there's a picture and a question mark there, because we don't know what we're going to put there, but the part of that grant was specific to putting a mascot in the gym. And so basically, if you have any questions, you can feel free to ask me now, or if anybody has any comments, but the top three are basically in your guys' hands now.
I have a question. When you say that 600 voted, did you have a way to keep people from voting more than once, or were those single votes by individuals?
Single votes by individuals. On Google Forms, you can set it to where only one person can vote at once.
Okay. And then a follow-up question, when you're talking about a color palette, did you have any type of suggestion? Obviously, you've probably thought through this much more than we have.
So to give you a little background, every middle school has its specific color, and it usually follows the Roy G. Biv, you know, the basic colors. Yellow would be great, but that's what the school district uses on its stationery and all of its other media. So it kind of narrows it down for us to having to pick something a little outside the box. So one of the suggestions that have been brought up are like silver and gold, like accents to what we already have as black. We realize that our students are low income, and having them go out and purchase new things would probably not be very well received by, you know, students and staff and everybody. So being able to mix something into the what's already existing there, the black, white, and gray, that would be great.
Any questions from board members?
Yes, I have a question.
Yes.
So I'm just wondering if you and the group of students considered just renaming the Washington Middle School, because it seems that if you use the argument that you're using now, colonialism, as a derogatory term, having, you know, a history of power over one group of over others, right? For, well, we know the history, right?
Yep.
So it seems logical then to not only replace the mascot, but also to replace the person that the mascot is representing, right? So I'm just wondering about how you separated the mascot from George Washington. Perhaps there's an argument you could say he was colonial or not. There's always two sides to every story, but every argument. But I'm just wondering if there was discussion about that, or if that's something that you've thought about. And so I'm just curious about that.
There was discussion around that. The procedure is just for naming of different groups, mascots, and individual organizations. We didn't go as far as to rename the school. And part of the reason for that is it's a much larger process that involves a lot more community input. The 4226 procedure is pretty well laid out. I mean, I'm leaving it on step 4 for you guys. That's the top 3 votes. But I mean, if I could, you know, had a little magic wand, we would be at Cesar Chavez Middle School. So just putting that out there.
I feel you, brother.
Just in case, huh?
Yeah, I think just using the argument, if it continues to be George Washington Middle School Hornets, I mean, yeah, there's still something there.
Yeah, and I think one of the
argument.
reasons that the Wolverine was such a popular name is because of the alliteration, Washington Wolverines.
Yes.
So that's why they asked for the top 3, just, you know, if it's a decision that is made. But if there is a procedure that we could follow after, you know, our success here, knock, knock. If we want to do a name change of the building, I would be more than happy to be part of that.
probably a bigger discussion than what we're prepared for today.
Exactly. But I'm glad for the fact that it's brought up.
Any other questions, Raymond? Any other questions from the board?
This is just informational
Hold
for
on,
today. We're
hold
not
on,
making
hold
a
on,
decision
hold
today,
on.
right? Is that correct?
That's correct. It's
Okay.
just information. It's not intended. We are not going to make a decision today. Don?
Okay.
Now,
Did you have a question or a comment? Okay. Oh dear. Okay, Gonzalo, thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you guys for your time.
Thank you for the consideration that you gave to all of your students and having them be a part of this process. Okay, next item on the agenda is the monthly financial report update from Becky.
Good evening, Board.
Good evening, Becky.
Thank you. This is your finance report for February 2021. Under the slide 2 for the executive summary, items of interest, the district received notice of the second grant available of the ESSER 2 funds in the amount of $22.4 million. That was great news. The state did adjust our transportation funding from 3.3 million to 1.4 million. That funding reduction is based on the low number of student ridership during the fall and winter. This was an expected reduction, and I know there is legislation right now pending on that.
We're working on that.
Yes. Our enrollment did decrease slightly, again, down 24 FTE from as compared to January. So we are now currently at a 2% below our budget. And then we did pay the 1.2 million for the 2,696 student laptops that we got under the GEAR, the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Computer Initiative Grant. You might remember we got the revenue last month. So, next slide, please. This is the 5-year actual FTE enrollment. So this is the K-12 and the ALE. It shows a trend there. And this is the enrollment compared to budget. You can see that we're down slightly there. Next slide, please. And this is our revenue. This is budget compared to actual. You can see we're trending just a little bit lower than budget and actual from last year. And then our cash flow, and this is just reflecting slightly below. And again, it's based on our enrollment being down and the loss of the transportation allocation. And next slide. And this is our total expenditure budget. You can see that we're up slightly. And that is reflective of that 1.2 million for the computers. And the payroll trend. You can see that we're trending right along with budget. The black bar and the blue bar. And next slide. And this is the MSOCs, our supplies and materials. And we are slightly below what we budgeted and slightly above last year on our supplies and materials. And then our pandemic costs, you'll see in the cost for distance learning, that's up to 6.1 million. That reflects those computers. And everything else pretty much not much above last month. And then the next slide. So on this one, what I added, you'll see the top line there for the CARES ESSER. We are now projecting that we are have spent all of the first ESSER 1, 5.8. And you can see the GEAR grant in there now, added in. And that gives us a total as of February 28th of 9.4 million that we have in pandemic costs. So, any questions?
Any questions or comments from board members?
I have a comment. Becky, I want to thank you for this so easy to read monthly finance report and being so precise in it. Thank you for all the hard work you're doing, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Don.
Any other questions or comments? I think it'll be real eye-opening for our legislators from the 14th district tomorrow when I meet with them, when I tell them that we've lost $2 million because we didn't have kids on buses. So I know that that bill is still active in the Senate, so we will see what we can do to recoup that money. Thank you, Becky. Great presentation. Next on our agenda is our first opportunity for comments from the public. This is the first time we've been able to do this in a year. I'm excited. I'm going to go through the protocols quickly. These are will be applicable to both opportunities for comments from the public. During these opportunities, speakers will be treated in a respectful manner. The board does not engage in dialogue at this time or typically respond to items that are not on the agenda. The audience is expected to give their attention to the speaker. As I indicated earlier, members of the public who wish to speak at public comment time had to register with the executive assistant to the superintendent. When you're called and come to the microphone, please introduce yourself and state all affiliations with the district, whether you're a parent, which school you're in, a staff member, which school you are in, a citizen, etc. Comments on agenda items will be taken during this first opportunity for public comment. And the second opportunity, which comes at the end of the meeting, is for items that are not on the agenda. Please keep your comments to 3 minutes or as close as possible so that everyone has a chance to be heard. Refrain from discussing the performance of an employee or the interpretations or application of the district's labor agreements, including grievances, and refrain from making derogatory comments about individuals. Jennifer, do we have, I can't see what you're doing. No? Okay. We have no one who signed up for this comment period, so we will move on. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. The purpose of the consent agenda is for board members to be able to dispense of routine actions with one vote. These actions are typically delegated to the superintendent, but the board has the responsibility for approval. The items on tonight's consent agenda consist of approval of minutes of the meetings of February 1, 8, 16, and 22. Approval of board attendance virtual attendance at the 2021 National School Board Association Advocacy Institute online, approval of personnel actions, notification of approval of warrants for February 2021, and tonight the warrants consist of two groups of ASB warrants, 4 groups of general fund warrants, and 1 group of payroll warrants. And finally, tonight's consent agenda contains a budget status report for February 2021. Any board member has the right to remove any item from the consent agenda for separate action and/or discussion. Is there a board member who wishes to do so? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion for approval of the consent agenda as submitted.
So moved.
Moved by Norm, seconded by Raymond. Is there any discussion? Jennifer, do we want to call roll or just do an aye, nay?
Norm Walker,
Aye.
Raymond Navarro Jr.,
Aye.
Martha Rice,
Aye.
Don Davis Jr.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passed 4-0.
Thank you, Jennifer. Next item on the agenda is a discussion of approval of the proclamation for the Yakima with the Yakima Nation. Mr. Superintendent.
Thank you, President Rice, Board of Directors. You may recall about a month ago, we shared that there was some information forthcoming around the land acknowledgement, but also the Yakima Nation proclamation. And the work that we engaged in with the Yakima Nation resulted in a proclamation that was then verbally approved by the chief of the Yakima Nation and one other high-ranking tribal member. This was put together under the leadership of Sean McGeaney and in conjunction with Elise Washines as well, representing the Yakima Nation. And we have been told that this proclamation is something that the tribe will approve, but they would like to approve this after we approve this, which is a little bit out of the ordinary for us as a board, but we also understand that we are working with a sovereign nation, and they would like to have this approved by us first and then finalize it in tribal council when we actually present to the education committee, which is in the coming months, I believe. Dr. McGeaney, what month will that happen in? May. Thank you. Thank you. So we could actually read through this if you would like, or how would you like me to address this, President Rice?
I think there's value in having this read into the record and then having a discussion and a motion.
Okay. Okay. I'm looking at, you probably don't have it, Dr. McGeaney, on you? Okay, so I will, if it's okay, I will go ahead and read this.
Absolutely.
Okay, all right. Yakima Public Schools Proclamation, Yakima Nation Treaty Day. Whereas Yakima School District recognizes that the indigenous peoples were the original occupants of lands that would later become known as the Americas, and whereas as First Americans, Native Americans, and Alaska Native have helped shape the future of Washington and the United States through every turn of our history. And whereas Yakima School District Office of Indian Education provides services for Native American and Alaska Native students, such as tracking student data, coaching and mentoring students, advocating in our schools and community, promoting student participation, connecting students and their families to community resources, promoting engagement in cultural activities, and serving as a liaison to interface with the 14 confederated tribes and bands of the Yakima Nation. And whereas 507 students in the Yakima School District identify as Native American or Alaska Native. And whereas we serve all Indigenous students and recognize their cultural heritage. And whereas Native Americans and Alaska Natives have moving stories of tragedy, triumph, and reliance that need to be shared with future generations. And whereas our community is stronger because of the diversity of our population. And whereas inclusion is a core value of our district, and the school board has a responsibility to oppose the systemic racism toward Indigenous people in Washington and the United States, which perpetuates high rates of poverty and income inequality, exacerbating disproportionate health, education, and social crisis. And whereas the school board promotes policies and practices that reflect the experiences for Native Americans and Alaska Natives to ensure greater access and opportunity and honor our country's Indigenous roots, history, and contributions. And whereas the school board promises to engage in consultation through a collaborative dialogue with the 14 confederated tribes and bands of the Yakima Nation. And whereas the school board commits to creating successful educational outcomes for Native American, Alaska Native, and all Indigenous students. Now, therefore, the Yakima School District Board of Directors proclaims June 9th, 2021 to be Yakima Nation Treaty Day and encourages all members of our community to join in celebrating our Native American, Alaska Native, and Indigenous students. Dated this 18th day of May, 2021.
Thank you, Trevor. Any questions or comments from board members? Sean, would you like to elaborate?
I don't have a lot to add to it other than we did do it in conjunction with. So I want to thank Elise Washings particularly for her collaboration on the document. And they were quite enthusiastic. It will be one of the first districts to do such a board proclamation in recognition of the holiday.
That's kind of surprising. Trevor.
Dr. McGeady, there's a statement in here that says, whereas the school board, actually here it is, whereas the school board promises to engage in consultation through a collaborative dialogue with the 14 confederated tribes and bands of the Yakima Nation. Could you share with our school board what that means to engage in consultation and how we currently meet this obligation?
So we began consultation with the nation 3 years ago. What it looks like is approximately twice a year. Representation, like Superintendent Green and myself, Mr. Diner's been part of the team this year, meet with their representatives such as Director Washings, Chairman Saluskin, and Liaison Washings. And it really is an open conversation between the sovereign nation and the district around how we can better support Native Americans and the issues that they face, the barriers to be removed as they engage in public education in our city. It started off as just small roundtable conversations. We were honored last year to be invited to Tribal Council and be in front of the table with all 14 directors, which is a high honor. And we're headed back there again this May. So we have formal meetings and there are lots of informal phone calls, texts, and emails, particularly between Elise and myself as we kind of work together to make education better for all Native American students in our schools.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. McGeady. I have one other question. I think that I just want some clarification on a phrase here. I'm wondering if we may have missed a word here. It is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the sixth whereas down. And it states, whereas Native Americans and Alaska Natives have moving stories of tragedy, triumph, and it says reliance. I'm wondering if that is resilience.
You're correct, that is in there.
Okay, so resilience that need to be shared with future generations. Okay, thank you.
So we'll fix that, right?
Yes, we will.
Okay.
But that does bring up a good point there. It does say that the school board will have this collaborative dialogue with the Yakima Nation. So maybe I'm not sure if that's what we intended or, because that's not been what has occurred. So in the future, will the board meet with leadership, the Yakima Nation, or how would that dialogue look like? So that's one of my questions.
Yeah, my recommendation would be that, and we meet every other month with members of the Yakima tribe, and I would like to take that to them because I believe that they would be in agreement to have me as a representative from the board in working with them. But if they are open to any other expanded opportunity, I would certainly put that on our agenda to see what that could look like from their perspective.
Does that answer your question, Raymond? Okay. Go ahead. You have the microphone.
I have the microphone. So, okay. So I do want to say I do support this proclamation, and I want to thank Superintendent and the team, plus yourself, for all the work. It's been 3 years in the making. And so I know that this proclamation, it honors the original occupants of our area, of our region, right? And it recognizes and respects our indigenous peoples, the kind of the relationship, kinship they have with and the beliefs with the land. So I think that's very important to note here with this proclamation, and about their beliefs and with the relationship with the land. It's so important. Also, the proclamation mentions some of the atrocities or the genocide or the injustices, right? The broken treaties and so forth that have occurred over time, and recognizing that as I guess the building of a framework, right, of reconciliation with them. So that's why I really, really support this proclamation, that it is setting up that framework for the school district to reconcile with the Yakima Nation, and to, and we're doing this for all the students, but for this population of students, we want to do better, right? And our promise, I like that where we say the promise is that we will collaborate with the Yakima Nation, and we will ensure the success of Native American, Alaska Native, and Indigenous students. So, I just wanted to mention that, and that's why I think that's why this is so important that we do this. We initiate this proclamation and we read it into the books, and that's why I am in support of this proclamation. Thank you.
Thank you, Raymond. John, do you have any comment or question?
I just want to make the motion to move.
Okay, when we get there. Norm, do you have any comment or question? I want to thank Superintendent Green and Dr. McGinney for their work on this. This is a long time coming, as Raymond indicated, and I'm looking forward to developing the partnership even further with the nation.
It has been very exciting to develop a strong, consistent meeting and relationship with the tribe. At the last meeting that we did have, they requested to have their new superintendent of their tribal school with us as well. So congratulations to Adam Strom, who is the new superintendent of the Yakima Tribal School. And we're excited about that partnership. He has already reached out to Principal Diner here, and they're developing ways in which our students can engage in some science practicum on the tribal nation there with salmon runs and things like that they can salmon release and other opportunities. And they are interested in any professional growth opportunities that we can extend virtually to their teachers as well, because as we know, they are a small system with typically one teacher in each subject. So they are in a need of the opportunity to engage in collaboration. So that's another opportunity that is also budding and growing in this partnership with the Yakima Nation.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Is there any other discussion on this topic before we?
I do have one question in wording, and I think when Trevor was reading it, he kind of crossed his mind too. It's in the paragraph about inclusion, whereas inclusion is a core value, and they use the term in here systematic racism, and I'm wondering if we want to use the term systemic racism, which there's a slightly different meaning there. And in fact, there's a whole discussion on online. You could look at the difference between systematic and systemic. So we might want to look at which word we want to use there.
Yeah, I do believe it's systemic racism, but I think Dr. McGinney may be checking his notes. You bring up a good point. Thank you for that, Norm. I did not catch that, but that is something that we do need to clarify.
So we'll look into that, right?
Okay. Yep.
Okay. Any other comment, question, discussion? Okay. I would entertain a motion for approval of the Yakima Nation Treaty Days Proclamation. Don?
I so move. I move to nominate this as a thing that we do.
Second.
Moved by Don, seconded by Norm. Is there any further discussion?
Yes, Norm brought up the definition. Will that be changed later, or will that be something that we'll do or discuss, or how would that?
The systemic versus
Yeah.
systematic?
Because that's going to change. That'll change.
I'm thinking it's supposed to be systemic, but
I believe it's systemic. What I would recommend is, if I may, I would recommend making a motion to approve it with the corrections and the changes related to review of our notes on the two components, which was a systemic issue is one, and the other was reliance to resilience.
Yeah.
And that way, then we can have the freedom to make sure we make those corrections. And I will then reach out to the board members and share what those updates are.
okay.
Okay. I so move that we accept this with the changes from the systemic to and resilience at the
Based on staff's notes.
on our notes.
Okay.
Thank you.
But now, sorry, I don't want to be parliamentarian. We do have two motions on the table at this time.
It could be
I
friendly.
removed one and brought the other.
Oh, you removed one?
Yes.
Okay,
It could be a friendly too.
All right.
Norm, are you still okay with your second? Okay. All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve the proclamation that we have in front of us for Yakima Nation Treaty Day. And I think, Jennifer, if we could have a roll call vote.
Norm Walker,
Aye.
Raymond Navarro Jr.,
Aye.
Martha Rice,
Aye.
Don Davis Jr.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passed 4-0.
Thank you, Jennifer. We've now reached the second opportunity for comments from the public. Jennifer, do we have anything? Okay, we have no one signed up for comments from the public. Mr. Superintendent, do we have a need for an executive session?
We do have a need for a 10-minute executive session.
And this is on lease or purchase of real estate?
It is on the selection of a site or acquisition of real estate, correct?
Okay. I need a motion to move into executive session for 10 minutes for the purpose of lease or purchase of real estate.
So moved.
Moved by Raymond, seconded by Don. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Raymond? Aye for me as well. So we're going to take probably a 5-minute break, allow people to go on with their evening, and we'll reshuffle ourselves here and move into executive session. Thank you all very much for coming. Safe travels going home. Bye-bye. We're back in open session. Thank you for allowing us the time to extend as we needed to. Is there anything else for the good of the order? Seeing none, we are adjourned. Thank you all for coming.